Thank you. Okay, welcome everyone to the Building Decarbonization Coalition's National Policy Call series. This is a new series. You may have known that we do an ongoing California policy call to update folks on what's happening in building decarb there. But this year we've expanded our calls to just highlight different states throughout the US because there's so much going on, and I feel like half of my conversations are asking people like, what's happening in Washington or Maine or Illinois or Colorado? So this is just an opportunity for us to share that information, to build up the building decarb movement, and also to kind of take the lessons from others and hopefully apply them to our own work, whatever state we're in. So this is our third call in this series. You can check out past calls on Illinois and Maine on our website. And today we're focusing on Colorado. And I'm Kristen George Bagdanoff. I'll be hosting the call today. I'm the manager of policy research and knowledge sharing at BDC. And I'm very excited about all of the knowledge gathered in this virtual room today. And we're going to be sharing it. So it's really my ideal way to spend an hour. BDC, if you're not familiar with it, is a member-based organization that is basically trying to decarbonize the built environment. And so we have a broad group of stakeholders that are part of our coalition, and we're working in market transformation, policy acceleration, and consumer inspiration. So just in terms of how things are going to go, we have 4 panelists. Each will be speaking for about 8 minutes on various topics that their work focuses on relating to building decarb in Colorado. We're doing this panel style so that we can see, there's not just one policy or one approach to policy or movement building or community organizing in Colorado. There are many perspectives, and we want to kind of bring together this mosaic of perspectives to kind of share all the various approaches in the state. So everyone is muted, and if you have questions, feel free to insert them into the chat as they arise, and we'll keep track of those. Our panelists may answer them in the chat, but if not, we'll raise them at the end of the presentation for our panelists to answer. And this is being recorded, as you know, and we will be sending out this recording and some notes following the webinar. So introductions, panel presentations, discussion, pretty straightforward agenda here. So we have, first I'll just give the names and titles of our folks, but you can see their bios on our newsletter that we recently sent out. So we have Amy Jiron, the Director for Building Decarbonization Policy at the Colorado Energy Office. We have Kent Marsh, Vice President for Capital Planning, Sustainability, and Campus Operations at Colorado Mesa University. Meera Fickling, Senior Climate Policy Analyst, Western Resource Advocates, and Portia Prescott, the President of the Rocky Mountain NAACP. Oh, and here they are. Great, so we're going to be starting out with Amy's presentation. So I will go ahead and pass the mic to Amy.
Hi, thanks so much, and hope you all are having a good day. Amy Jiron, I started at the Colorado Energy Office in March, so I'm relatively new, and my colleagues say that we are trying to create building decarbonization world domination. So we're hoping for that. Hiring like crazy, but a little bit about myself. I'm a Colorado native, born at St. Joe's in Denver, grew up in the metro area. Love this place like it's my home, which it is. So I'm glad to be representing and doing the good, tough work that we have in front of us for Colorado building decarb. And really excited to talk about our strategies in the next few slides. So you can go to the next slide. And by the way, that's the San Luis Valley, big solar array down there on the first slide. And then a couple of affordable housing developments that we have that are all electric on the second slide that you just saw. So what's happening in Colorado? Well, There was a championship that just happened a couple weeks ago, something about a basketball team. But also we've had more rain in the past 6 months than we usually have in an entire year. So yes, the Pooter is very high, as is our snow storage system up in the mountain peaks. So really happy and relieved to see that. I know it's not good for all things, but it is certainly good for wildfires, which we've had in December in the past few years. So with terrible destruction. So in a nutshell, we have almost 6 million people. We've had tremendous growth in the last 2 decades, about 70,000 people moving to Colorado in the last 20 years. Our home prices reflect that. It's become very expensive to buy a home here in the past decade and even maybe shorter. However, our total energy consumption is in the bottom third for the United States, and we produce a lot of energy that we export. And then I think one thing that we're very proud of here in Colorado is the trajectory that we have towards renewables. So we've had four times growth in renewables: wind energy, solar energy, hydro, and storage since 2010. So that's almost 40% of our energy generation right now for the state. You can go to the next slide. But we're talking about buildings today. So one thing that I am kicking off as the director of the Building Decarb team is a stock study. So we'll have a lot of information about how many buildings we have in Colorado, the size, age, system types, any other piece of information that might be useful for us in targeting and rolling out our policies and strategies. But this is what we know so far. More than 2 million homes, spending about $4 million on their energy, and more than 250,000 commercial buildings spending about $3 million on their energy. And you can see the pie chart. The blue and brown are the building sector, green is industrial, and then yellow is transportation. Our transportation team is amazing. So if you have a chance to see the Colorado Energy Office talk about EVs, take advantage. It's a really great team. They've done a huge amount of work. They have a big campaign happening right now. You can go to the next slide. So in order to tackle decarbonization in Colorado, we put together a roadmap in 2020, 2021. And through that roadmap, we did modeling and developed strategies, and our legislative targets are 26% greenhouse gas emissions reduction by 2025, 50% by 2030, and net zero now by 2040. That's the newest legislation that passed in this past session, which was just ended last month. And we are updating our roadmap and our strategies right now. So we just finished a series of roundtable discussion, or actually open public meetings throughout the state, Trinidad, Pueblo. I can't remember all of the other places, but we did it through the months of May and June, and just had listening sessions for people, anybody that wanted to come talk to us about what we should do about greenhouse gas emissions. And that was very much aligned with our DEI initiatives, and we call it disproportionately impacted communities. So that's very much in line with how we are trying to address issues of underrepresentation and all of the different ripples that come from all of the systemic problems that we've had in the past. So you can go to the next slide. So here are our building related activities, and these are the strategies that come directly from the roadmap. The link is in the slide before this one, but these are only buildings related strategies that were laid out in our 2020-2021 plan. Hopefully we'll be moving into new strategies moving forward. Not that these are the complete and final solutions to what we're trying to do with Building Decarb. I think a lot of this is an incremental pilot, trial, evaluate, iterate, improve process. But there are 5 strategies that I've listed here, and the left column is the strategy, and the right column is sort of our approach to the solution. So the first one is, of course, to support energy efficiency investments from gas utilities and also our electric utilities in building shell improvements. And that's a very specific, I think, initiative that is challenging because of cost. And I think that applies both in the residential and commercial sectors. But we are working on that through clean heat plans, which you're going to hear a bunch about later on in this hour. So I'm gonna move forward and talk a little bit about our energy performance for buildings and our building codes work, which is, I think, a little bit more underway or something more that I can talk about in terms of how we are progressing there. So our energy performance standard is in rulemaking right now. It will roll out in August or September. It covers buildings, commercial buildings that are 50,000 square feet or larger. They have to meet energy use index and other targets by 2026 in order to achieve 7% greenhouse gas emissions reductions across our covered building stock based on a 2021 baseline by 2026. So it's actually quite challenging, and I'd encourage you to go check out our rulemaking and some of our initial rules on that if you have a moment. And then we also have just rolled out and will be launching our advanced building codes as well. So we have created a model building code that is aligned with IECC 2021 that starts July 1st of 2023, which is the beginning of our fiscal year, our new fiscal year. We also have rolled out a model solar ready, EV ready, and electric ready code to align with that IECC 2021 model code. And I'm saying model code because we are a home rule state, and that means that local governments have the opportunity to choose for themselves, though we do hope that they choose well. So that's why we've created these model codes. And in the next year, we'll be developing a green code, which will be our stretch code, and really starting to push the envelope on embodied energy, transportation, land use planning, and other topics, so that there is something out there that local governments can look to in order to really progress what they're doing as well. Next slide. And then adoption of electric heat pumps. So I think we're all thinking about this, and how do we do this, and what's the supply chain, and who's going to install them, and can we get them from trying to talk people out of doing heat pumps and talking them into doing it. So I'm really lucky to have come into this position after a lot of work that happened with my predecessor, and also others in the industry who are very, very excited about rolling out electrification across the state. And I will point to Love Electric as a resource for anyone on the call that's interested in learning more about what we're trying to do with electrification here in Colorado. And it does have a good amount of information on rebates that are available, on the technology, on certified contractors. And that comes from a cohort of I'm going to call them friends who have been working together to pull all of that together, including utilities, NGOs, local governments, and the manufacturing and business community. So it's a lot of work that is behind that Love Electric website in order to provide consumers with information all in one place. And then finally, our fifth initiative is to expand financing programs. And I'm actually really, really excited about work that's happening here. We have an award-winning energy performance contracting program, which is run by one of my colleagues in in the sci-fi program at the CEO. We have a really robust CPACE program, and the Colorado Clean Energy Fund is innovating like crazy, rolling out on-bill financing with Tri-State, also on-bill affordable repayment programs with a couple of different developers. So stay tuned with the Colorado Clean Energy Fund. I think we're going to see some good stuff there that is worth modeling in other states and replicating as much as we can. And you can go to the next slide, which is really about affordable housing and making sure that we're developing existing homes and new homes that are energy efficient, electric, sustainable, resilient, safe, all the words, healthy, all of those things. We're working towards those. And that means that we have to work across a lot of different agencies here at the state. So we're working with the Department of Local Affairs, we're working with the Department of Housing, with our Economic Development Agency, and a bunch of other, local governments, of course, and certification bodies, et cetera, et cetera. But three programs that are of interest, I think, potentially to folks on the call today are the affordable housing funding programs that are rolling out through a variety of different agencies, but contain minimal energy efficiency codes for our new developments. And then, of course, the Innovative Housing Incentive Program, IHIP, which is really exciting and promoting offsite manufacturing, which I think can be the solution for workforce housing, for workforce problems, for supply chain problems, to drive costs down and to get things built faster and more cost effectively. So those are things that are happening that are, definitely in the works. So what's next? I added a bunch of slides after this, which all of you can reference, and I'm going to wrap up here in just a minute. But I added the slides because these are the funding sources that are coming into the Building Decarb team, and you can just kind of pan through these slides. But we're trying to create a holistic program that will wrap all these things together to really create that sustainable market transformation that can impact the state for the long term. So if you have suggestions about how we can tackle that, please do email me or put some thoughts in the chat, or feel free to call me. I'm all ears, and so are the rest of us at CEO. With that, I will turn it back to the rest of our speakers and say thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy. That was such a great overview. And yeah, we're going to dive right into hear more about clean heat plans with Meera.
All right, thank you. Next slide, please. Great. So today I'm going to talk about Colorado's Clean Heat Standard and some of the enabling policies that we have surrounding that. So this is a standard that was passed in 2021. And it requires gas utilities to file plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from end uses, so from combustion, primarily in residential and commercial buildings, by 4% by 2025 and 22% by 2030. So the utilities can use a number of different resources that include beneficial electrification, demand side management, alternative pipeline fuels, so really either renewable natural gas or green hydrogen, and distribution system leak repair to meet those targets. The standard excludes gas transport customers, so it by and large doesn't cover industrial facilities, but it does cover residential and commercial customers. So in other words, you can primarily think of this as a buildings decarbonization bill. Next slide. So the challenge is that the standard requires a really sharp departure from the way we've historically used and invested in our natural gas system, particularly on the retail side. So the chart on the left shows Xcel Colorado's annual actual and projected spending on gas infrastructure per year. The value of this infrastructure is added to the utilities rate base, and ratepayers pay off those assets over time. So on average, these are assets that are depreciated over almost 60 years. And you can see while infrastructure spending has been somewhat volatile from year to year, the pace of Xcel's investment into its gas infrastructure has roughly doubled over time. Meanwhile, the chart on the right shows modeling results by E3 for the Colorado Greenhouse Gas Roadmap. It was a document that was published in 2020 that outlines our state's strategy for achieving our greenhouse gas emissions targets. And it shows that in our House Bill 1261 scenario, which is the scenario that meets our 90% decarbonization target by 2050, annual consumption of all pipeline gas, including fossil gas, renewable natural gas, and hydrogen, shrinks dramatically by 94% from today's levels. A little bit of renewable natural gas and hydrogen replaces a small sliver of today's gas consumption, but the vast majority is replaced by electricity as our homes and our businesses switch to heat pumps to heat our space and heat our water. So to summarize, we have accelerated gas system investments, totaling hundreds of millions of dollars per year that gas utility customers will pay back over several decades, even as the number of customers and the sales to those customers is projected to decline dramatically. Next slide, please. So this slide shows in a little bit more detail the tension between our climate targets and current gas utility investment models. So currently, despite what we know about how gas consumption is likely to decline in a low carbon future, the gas utilities investment model actually relies on continuing to add more customers in the future. So in its most recent 2022 gas rate case, Xcel argued if they add new customers, those new customers pay for the cost to serve them through their rates. And due to time, I won't run through all of the numbers on the slide, but to summarize, Xcel testified that to pay off its past 2019 to 2022 investments, the company assumed that new capacity additions, accounting for about a third of that past investment, will support 65,000 more customers in the future, added at some point, who will contribute the shortfall in revenue. So in other words, the company's spending on new capital investment relies on continually adding new customers to the gas system to provide sufficient revenue to pay them off. And when asked about this at hearing, the company acknowledged that this business model would be risky if gas usage declines. So the quote on the slide, if customers put in a ground source heat pump in like year 5, we could be in big trouble, comes from a response to commissioner questioning at the PUC hearing last summer. Next slide. So what are we doing in Colorado to address gas system investment in light of our climate goals? We had a PUC regulatory proceeding last year to implement the clean heat standard. VWRA participated in that proceeding. And it included gas infrastructure planning rules. Those rules were not required by the clean heat legislation, but the rulemaking requires gas utilities to submit gas infrastructure plans, presenting detailed information about large, so above $3 million projects anticipated within 6 years. And a key provision in the rules requires a certain number of projects, 5 for Xcel, 2 to 3 for smaller utilities, listed in the gas infrastructure plan to receive a non-pipeline alternatives analysis. So in other words, the utilities need to start looking at ways that traditional gas pipeline infrastructure investments can be delayed or prevented through alternatives like electrification, efficiency, and gas demand response that can reduce gas demand on a peak design day. And so the goal is to bend the curve of the traditional gas business model that prioritize new business and new capacity additions. Part of that proceeding also dealt with gas line extension allowances. So these are payments to a new building developer that subsidize part of the cost of connecting to the gas system. And they're payments by the utility that ratepayers fund, ultimately. And there's evidence that these payments encourage developers to opt for gas as opposed to building all-electric new homes and buildings. Unfortunately, this PUC proceeding didn't completely eliminate gas LEAs, but we got another bite at the apple during this past legislative session. Next slide. So Senate Bill 291, which was passed just this past spring in May, was another opportunity for us to start looking at how we can sort of bend the curve of investments into our gas system in light of the state's climate goals. So this was actually really a response to high heating bills in the winter of 2022 to 2023. So in the winter of 2022, gas rates skyrocketed. And in Xcel's service territory, which is the largest in Colorado, residential gas rates were about 3 times what they were in 2020. And a lot of people were really upset about it. People were writing and calling their legislators hoping to find some relief. Now, the gas utility business model wasn't just a long-term issue in legislators' minds. It was also an immediate and a pressing issue that they had an interest in dealing with this session. And that piqued legislators' interest in running a big bill this session on utility rates. This was not a gas ban or a gas decarbonization bill, but legislators were looking to focus both on short-term fixes to rate volatility, as well as long-term fixes to the drivers behind increasing base rates. So some of what this legislation did. One, it eliminated gas line extension allowances by the end of 2023. So gas utilities will have to file updated tariffs by the end of this year, eliminating line extension allowances. It also looks at penalties for customers voluntarily terminating gas service and has some study provisions studying how we're depreciating gas investments over time and how certain fast-growing areas might be driving gas infrastructure costs and how we can mitigate that. Next slide. And so tying it all together, some of the lessons learned in Colorado and next steps. I think a big lesson learned is that we really need complementary policies. There's not one policy that's going to both drive decarbonization in buildings and also drive changes in our gas system investments to complement that. So we need a clean heat standard, but we also need gas infrastructure planning. We need to eliminate line extension allowances. And we also need many of the complementary policies that Amy went through in her previous presentation. And we're going to see those play out in the near future. So the Excel gas infrastructure planning proceeding is already underway with a commission decision this fall, and then Excel will file its first clean heat plan by August 1st of this year. So we will see this in action going forward.
All right, thank you so much, Meera. That was a great deep dive and a lot of lessons for us to use elsewhere in terms of framing legislation. So we'll go ahead and jump on over to Kent, who can be talking to us about geothermal.
Great, thank you, Kristen. My name is Kent Marsh, of course. I am the VP of Campus Operations at Colorado Mesa University. I've worked here for 11 or 12 years. I started in 2007. I spent a brief tenure of about 4 years working for the University of Colorado and was able to make it back here in February of 22, and I'm glad to be back. So if you'd go to the next slide for me, please. So our system started in 2007, and I've made this joke, and I don't think it's been super well received, but for those of us who have been listening to country music for a long time, there was a song that Dolly Parton came out with that said, "I was country before country was cool." I say that we were geo before geo was cool. I think our university has done a remarkable job of not spreading the great word about what we've been doing on our campus for the past 15 years. Fortunately, our system has gained lots of interest from everyone from the governor of Colorado to individuals who are looking at municipalities and how they can incorporate what we're doing at our campus. So it's been wonderful that the word's gotten out. In short, our building serves, or our system as we know it today, serves 16 buildings, a little over 1.2 million square feet. And big picture wise, really all our system allows us to do is to move heat energy from a classroom building to say some offices in the same building. A good example of that would be in the winter. Let's say we have a classroom full of students that's south facing, it's getting a lot of sun, we're cooling that room down, which means we're extracting heat from that room, where there might be an office or two on the north side of the building that's cold, and we're simply just grabbing heat from one room and moving it to the room that needs it. Our system also allows us to move heat energy between buildings, and we also dump a lot of waste heat to our swimming pool and into our irrigation water before we spray that across campus to irrigate our turf. So in short, really it's capturing and moving heat energy to where it's needed rather than wasting it to the air. And in so doing, we not only reduce our carbon footprint, but it helps us keep our operating costs at the lower end of the spectrum, which helps us keep our tuition low. Next slide, please. So, and how does our system work? So our system really works on the concept of a least energy path. And when we look at a building or a community, a campus, and several buildings, what that means is what I started to describe. We could be extracting waste heat from a portion of the building that is needing cooling and simply dumping that waste heat in another part of the building. Once those interior systems get either too warm or too cold, we then begin to move that heat from building to building. And we do that through what we have called our central loop. On our campus, we have 7 or 8 very large drill fields that are connected together via an 18-inch diameter piece of polyethylene pipe that runs from the north end of our campus to the south end of our campus. And that system allows us to connect all new buildings and all existing buildings into the system. And then I'd already mentioned that we also in the summer, we're cooling dominant, at least in the western slope of Colorado, which means over the next month and a half, we will have lots of waste heat that we need to get rid of. So we're constantly looking for new kind of heat sinks is what I described them. Next slide, please. The other part of our system that is very unique, in my opinion, is we design our system to take care of about 80% of the heating and cooling load. We do so because that other 20% is really expensive. There's not a lot of bang for the buck to drill that many more holes to completely heat all of our buildings with the central loop to heat and cool all of our buildings. So we rely on existing cooling towers that we have across campus. So over the next 3 or 4 weeks, maybe the next month and a half, in the evenings, we'll be firing up our cooling towers because our loop will get too warm. Likewise, in the winter, when we extract too much heat from the ground or from other areas on campus and our loop gets too cold, we can turn our boilers on to try to add that extra heat back into the loop. Our heat pumps are very efficient at moving heat between a room and a water circulating loop in a building when the delta T is really high. If that delta T gets very small or efficient, our heat pumps are not very efficient. Next slide, please. So as of late, we've had lots of conversations, whether it was the Western Governors, what was that called? Western Governors Association, I think, came out and visited our campus. Or I've spoken to some municipalities up Valley that are interested in expanding and learning more about how they could potentially serve their entire community with a networked system. I will say that CMU's system is a community system. Our campus serves over 10,000 students. We have another 1,500 faculty and staff. We've got 2.5 million square feet of campus buildings, sanitary sewer, water, power. We're our own purveyor of electricity. So I will say that our system is today a community system. We would like to expand our systems so that we could serve the broader community. We have a brand new high school that's being constructed right across the street from us. And we've talked to the school district about potentially extending our geo exchange system to serve the high school. And we're continuing to work through those issues. We'd also like to further the conversation with the city to see if there's a way of providing another utility, not unlike sanitary sewer, storm sewer, or water, a utility that's owned and maintained by the city that provides this geo resource. So as you look at new subdivisions that are developed, would it be possible through the zoning and development code to require some of the detention or retention basins to be drilled with a new drill field that could then be connected into this new utility and provided across the community? Anything else on that? No. So next slide, please. So why do we do this? At the time, back in 2007, we were building a new classroom building, and our governor at the time came out with some legislation that was called Greening of State Government. And that legislation required anyone that received funding from the state of Colorado through capital construction funds was required and is still today required to be certified at not less than LEED Gold or 3 globes on the green globes. And we were looking at geo at the time because we knew that that would help us reach that LEED goal. And from that point forward, we just continued to expand our system. As we drilled another field, we connected that field with the old field, and we provided that resource to a building. And so the unwritten rule on our campus is any new building or any significant renovation gets connected to our geo. So why do we do it? Geo exchange is incredibly efficient. Big picture wise, a geo exchange system consumes as little as 10 kilowatt hours per square foot of building per year, versus 22 kilowatt hours per square foot for a traditional building that has gas to heat the building and an electrical unit of some kind to cool the building. I've mentioned that our system provides up to 90% of the energy that we need to heat and cool our buildings. It saves us a little over $1.5 million per year in our operating costs. And since the system was installed in 07, 08, it saved us almost 16 million. Next slide, please. It's probably the most important slide of all of them is when we talk about building decarbonization. Our campus, when I started at Colorado Mesa in 07, we had 800,000 square feet of area under roof. In the intervening 15 years, we have added, do the quick math here, but we're at 2.4 million square feet. So over that time, had we decided to continue using traditional HVAC, which means I'm going to install a couple really big boilers in the building, and I'm going to run that hot water through a fan coil, and then I'm going to put some large rooftop units that I use to cool the building that runs cool water through those fan cools. Had we done that, we would have been spending around $1.8 million annually on our gas and electricity costs. Thus far, and well, this hasn't been updated, but the last time I updated this was in 22, we'd spent about $800,000. And then we'll look at this next slide and figure out what that looks like for building carb and how we haven't necessarily reduced our carbon footprint. Reducing would be, I've installed traditional gas and electric cooling, and now I've went in and retrofitted with geo. We've really, how would I say, we've not necessarily reduced, we've kind of kicked that down the road and saying, because we have a very incredibly efficient system, we have saved that amount of carbon that would have normally came out of our buildings. Hopefully that makes sense. That was a long discussion of what I was trying to say. The other thing that's interesting about that, quite frankly, is the fact that we're reducing the amount of kilowatt hours we buy from the utility. So regardless of what the cost of electricity does in the future, if it continues to grow, that's saving the university more and more money. The more expensive electricity gets in the future, the more money we save, which is a wonderful benefit of our system as well. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Kent. That's so exciting to see the development over the years. And I like the Dolly Parton jokes and Geo before Geo. It's great. And next, but certainly not least, we have Portia Prescott. Take it away, Portia.
Afternoon, good morning from the West Coast, almost afternoon in the East Coast. So thank you so much for being here. My name is Portia Prescott, and I am a Denver, Colorado native, born and raised in the Mile High City. And I'm actually very happy that we did. The Nuggets won for the first time in history, which I never thought I'd see, the championship. When we beat LA, it was over. So having said all that, I wear many hats, and it was great to see Meera, because I'm also a board member for the Western Resource Advocates. But today I'm talking to you as the president of the Rocky Mountain NAACP. And when we talk about equitable building for decarbonization, if we want to go to the next slide. A lot of people go, okay, so what is the Rocky Mountain NAACP? And what we have is our program called SEEP. For those of you who may not know, NAACP is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. So you can go there.org and learn more about the national organization. We encompass 50 states, and I just happen to represent as the Rocky Mountain NAACP, a tri-state region. We have more than 10,000 members across Colorado, Montana, and Wyoming, powered by thousands of volunteers and activists. And we have branches. And if we speak specifically talking today about Colorado, because I'm the president of Colorado, Montana, and Wyoming. And the reason to understand this is because of the topic. When we talk about equity, the biggest thing that we're known for in NAACP has been civil rights, activists. We were founded in 1908, incorporated in 1909. We've been there for, protecting the vote, but now we're taking that to another level, and that's protecting our environment. Here in the Rocky Mountain region, I have successfully helped develop what we call SEEP, and that's our Sustainable and Equitable Environments Program. And what it does is it seeks to support communities of color and low wealth communities to direct infrastructure and land use investment dollars, drive decision-making processes, and design policy solutions, because, which is not my favorite word, but those who are disproportionately impacted by environmental and climate inequity bear the greatest burdens. And as part of our commitment to protecting the planet, we are helping our community achieve more environmental goals. And basically we have a unique approach to it, because for so long, and I'm just going to be really honest, as a native of Colorado, we weren't included in this conversation. We're having high level conversations on this call talking about geothermal, decarbonization. I mean, from our community perspective, how many people do you really see in the African American or even Latina or Indigenous or Latino, Latinx or Indigenous or even LGBTQ space in this space feeling comfortable as themselves to have this topic? We have been excluded from the conversation because it has not been something that people thought about when you thought about climate, global warming, climate crisis. A lot of the times you just didn't see our faces there. So the big thing that we do, which we do on a national level for everything, is we educate, we advocate, and we stimulate environmental justice initiatives. And that's what SEEP really does. And so if we want to move to the next slide. So the biggest issue, it's no secret that if you think about manufacturing in our country, look at Flint, Michigan and the water issues. Think about Jackson, Mississippi and the issues that we're having. Is directly a lot of the manufacturers, the high pollution, they're typically in the Black and brown areas in the community. Why? One asks themselves, well, speaking specifically from Colorado, and this is a reality that you guys have to realize when we talk about where we are with climate, decarbonization, geothermal, all of it, it goes back to history. In the history of Colorado, there were areas where, I don't care what skin color you were, you could not live. And specifically in the Denver area, which has the worst air quality at certain days during summer months in the world. There were areas where Blacks were not allowed. It says specifically Negroes. So we were not allowed to purchase land, or you couldn't, if you were white, you couldn't even rent to us. If you were in Cherry Creek, Cherry Hills, Wash Park, if you think of all these beautiful places in Colorado, and I love it, but you have to be realistic. We couldn't live everywhere. We were two versions of redlining. We were by law only allowed to rent and to purchase in a certain area. Of course, where a lot of the bad things are developed. And at the same time, from a banking policy perspective, we were redlined, meaning even if you could live anywhere you wanted in the state, we couldn't get bank lending. So other people from other races who are just plain white could get, who could get basically historically bank loans. We couldn't. So when we go back to environmental justice statistics, in 2020, 73% of white Coloradoans owned their own home, compared with only 41% of Black Coloradoans. And this gap has been an increasing trend. Why is this important? Because when you're talking about decarbonizing, we must focus on all types of housing. We talk about solar panels. We talk about building green or electrification. Well, if we're predominantly renters, we're at the subject to being renting in a lot of those old buildings, renting in a lot of the buildings that aren't retrofitted. So when we look at the data, we have to look at how are we going to get sustainable? How are we going to make this work for all? So if you go to the national energy burdens across income levels compared to the national median energy burden, you can kind of see, and I want to thank a shout out to Julia Perboner. She is our climate justice coordinator. She's on this call and she puts together these really pretty slides. I take it from a contextual part and she makes it look pretty for everybody to understand. But you can basically see the energy burden, the percentage of the energy burden falls on the low income, 65 years, disability, low income, and then there's the non-low income. 36% of Americans live in places with failing grades for unhealthy levels of ozone or particularly pollution, with BIPOC communities being disproportionately impacted the most. I'm thankful to our governor, I'm thankful to Meera, I'm thankful to all these wonderful people who are on this call, because one of the big things that we really are really helping focus on is, number one, getting our voice there. Number two, talking about the policy. But number three, how do we involve us in this fight together? If we want to move to our next slide. And these have been kind of condensed. You can find more information about our program and what we're doing on a full level, because it's a lot. I mean, we want to be included in not just when we're talking about decarbonization, we're talking about federal government spending, we're talking about health, we're talking about transportation, we're talking about retrofitting old homes, we're talking about getting funding for those. It's not easy. It's the question becomes, how has the community been engaged, throughout the policy program? We weren't engaged. One of the things that we've done this year is being the NAACP, being a nationally recognized organization, we are bringing new voices to the table. I do have to admit it's getting better, but when you think about a lot of our senators or our representatives from the state house, they just didn't come to the community. It was almost as if we didn't have anything to say. However, we do. So then making sure that even across the country that your legislators, your senators, you are reaching out to hear our voices. We talk to our community about reducing, health. I mean, just talking about reducing energy use, reducing water use, preserving energy. A lot of my family, my dad's from Birmingham, Alabama, they love their gas stove, convincing everyone you can cook just as good on your electric stove, and then helping, the buildings, get funding for electrification. Who are the intended beneficiaries of the policy program? These are questions you want to ask yourself. What does the policy program do to address the economic barriers of adopting clean energy? It costs money to retrofit. It costs money to get electric cars. It costs money. So from an NAACP perspective, we are looking at reaching the people where we are. Our option is, I know people love the Teslas, and I know people love, when we talk about decarbonization, we're in a community where we're like public housing, carpooling, house before car. We partner with a lot of different organizations so that we're messaging. Many people can't afford to purchase an electric vehicle, let alone keep the maintenance of an electric vehicle. When we're talking to our community, we're talking about protecting our Mother Earth, but do you really need that car? I mean, even if you had to use transportation that is green buses, those are certain policies that we focus on. The cost for our community are some of the things that we focus on, and the important equitable building of decarbonization. It's a lot policy driven, but does it include education and outreach components both for itself and its benefits? When we talk education, we're known for doing Zooms, coming to the people, coming to the churches, coming to Juneteenth, coming to the Black Arts Festival, coming to all the different things of where we can reach our community where they are, from all walks, from Pride to Hispanic Heritage Month. We really work hard as an organization to be there, to be trusted voices, to be people that are not just trusted voices to them, but the people that are working with our governor, working with our mayors, working with our legislators, inviting them to the Capitol, having, green days at the Capitol where people actually are learning what the policy means. And moving forward, does the policy program provide an opportunity for local hires or workforce training, leading to quality jobs for members of disproportionately impacted communities? When we're talking about, the governor's talking about, these hydrogen plants or the geothermal. If you look at, just even you look at the grant where we just put on this call, jobs, include us in the workforce planning, include us in the job, in the job search. One of the things that we have done, we're working on green job fairs. We host job fairs. So far this year, we've held 3, but we're going to be hosting more. Making sure people understand that we can get jobs in this space is not, we're coming from a community where we have been limited to either you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, or you're going to be an athlete, or there's never been a concept that you can take environmental classes in high school, or, some of the things that we do with our community outreach. We are putting unique kids from the inner city, from our more of our diverse communities, and showing them that they can be a Kent or a Meera or a Amy or a Kristen. There are jobs in this green space. There's jobs in construction in this green space. So we're partnering, we're looking at working with unions. When our job fairs, we're looking at working with the different organizations. Think about who are going to be getting these $2 or $3 million grants to do this geothermal. Are you thinking about a diverse workforce? So these are when we talk about including equity into the decarbonization space. It's a holistic approach. It's like every part of this process needs to include unique and diverse voices. The next slide. An equitable transition to clean energy will prioritize disproportionately communities that need the benefits the most and provide the most assistance to those with the greatest need. It is no secret that our community is hurting. It is no secret that but we're willing and want to participate. So some of the things that we have done, we have used this equity and environmental justice mapping index tools that can be found at our on the Colorado website. The governor has this new website, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment's EnviroScreen, Justice 40, EJ scoring, American Forestry Equity Index, City and County of Denver Climate Action Sustainability and Resilience Building Equity Index. I am proud to say that I am a part of the new Denver mayor. We have a new mayor, Mike Johnston, and I'm part of his climate transition team. So I will be making sure that from a policy perspective, from a workforce development perspective, from a messaging, from an outreach perspective, you think about it, we cannot achieve the goals that we want to achieve for decarbonization if we don't include all voices, and we don't begin training our youth up that this is as natural as apple pie, being green, being, health conscious, being air conscious, water quality conscious. These are all things that we all have to achieve together. And I think that's been a part of what we felt has been missing. And these are the things that we're touching upon in our program that we're doing. And I'm trying to encapsulate this in 8 minutes. So I think if there's any last slide, I think if there's any questions, I think that's pretty much it for me.
Thank you so much, Portia. That was a wonderful way to round out our conversation. And I know, we don't have much time for discussion, but we've been recording the questions in the chat. And if we have the email addresses of our presenters here, it's holiday season, so don't expect a response right away. But if you have a specific question, you can reach out to ask them. I'll just ask our presenters, maybe in a couple words, just to have all of you respond to this prompt for us, which is, 2030 is kind of such this important year in the climate world. We have all these targets and goals, and maybe just in a few words, if you could share, in your ideal world, what does 2030 for building decarb look like in Colorado? What have we done from now until then, and what does it look like for you? So hopefully that's not stretching the imagination too much, but if any of our
if we're looking at 2023 and we're looking at 2030,
yeah,
I mean, for me, from a community perspective, I don't want to see the brown cloud anymore. I mean, I grew up in it, and it gets worse. And there's no reason, with all the resources, with the Inflation Reduction Act, there can't humanly possibly be, from 7 years from now, what we can achieve as a society, that there should be this big giant brown cloud. And in the summertime, we're reading articles because these are kids, these are my community kids. We can't go outside. Where are we gonna go? We don't have air conditioning. We're not turning our air on. The energy cost is too high. So for me, 2030 looks like we have handled that brown cloud problem, and we've handled it all together, and we really addressed it.
Yeah, love that.
For Colorado Mesa University, we've received $6 million from the state of Colorado this year that will be matched with $3 million cash from the university that will allow us to expand our geosystem so that we can connect the remaining buildings on our campus. A broader goal, though, not officially a goal of the university, because we don't yet know what it takes to get to net zero, but obviously we're trying to figure out how we can provide solar. Our buildings are electrified as we connect them to the geosystem, but we're still buying the same electricity from Excel. So we would, in 2030, I would hope we'd have been able to figure out a way to potentially allow the university and others to build a large monolith type array somewhere off campus and be able to wheel that power into the system, just like you do with natural gas today, so that we could generate it somewhere else and provide it to our campus. The cost of adding enough solar on roofs and parking garages across campus is really cost prohibitive. A larger monolith array somewhere offsite is something we could do. That's the big goal.
That would be quite the feat. Amy, do you have thoughts on 2030?
Yeah, I think if we do our job well, that my dreams for 2030 would be that we have a really robust workforce that is tackling the building space to make not just decarbonize, but also make buildings healthier, safer, you know, more resilient, better, more comfortable, more accessible. Yeah, and that there's a strong pipeline of up and coming people that want to work in the building space. You know, architecture is very dreamy, I think, as a degree or a profession, but the rest of the stuff that is associated with buildings is maybe a little less known. And so I hope that makes it to the mainstream and we see a lot of people interested.
Awesome, would love that too. And Meera, if you want to close this out.
Yes, of course. The challenge between now and 2030 is really quite vast, and we need rapid market transformation of the HVAC sector in order to get there. So if you look at the modeling done by E3 behind the Colorado greenhouse gas roadmap that they did in 2020 or 2021, it shows that by 2030, the majority of sales of appliances that are replacing, you know, our gas furnaces and our gas boilers and our gas water heaters today are electric heat pumps. So over 60% of gas furnace replacements are heat pumps. About 80%, I think, of AC replacements are heat pumps, according to that analysis. That requires a huge shift, not just among customers, but also among contractors, among distributors, from where the market is today. And it is especially challenging because of the diversity of customers that we have in Colorado. So we need to make sure that low-income customers, disproportionately impacted communities are brought along in this transition, that we're making electrification affordable to those families. And it also requires us to make sure that we are keeping energy affordable throughout that transition, which requires smart investments on both the gas and the electric side from the utilities. So it's really quite the challenge, and you know, we certainly look forward to continue to work on it in coming years.
Well, thank you all, and please join me in thanking our wonderful panelists. I think together we can make all those dreams a reality for 2030. We'll be sending out slides, notes, etc. tomorrow. So thank you all, and I hope you have a wonderful week, and sign up for our newsletter to get information on our next policy call. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thanks,